Good morning and welcome to H3 TV. I'm feeling very footloose and fancy free this Friday, so I have my hair kind of big and wild, trying to go back to the 80s or something. But I love when people gather with us to talk, to listen to us and to engage with us on H3 TV. H3 TV was created in 2020 when I recognized people were going through a massive disruption in almost every area of their life for many people. And how did they stay hopeful, healthy, and happy? My decision was to come into your living rooms, into your kitchens, into your office, into your home office or your office back in a building, and to bring you encouragement of hope, health, and happiness. I don't think it's all about motivation and inspiration. I think it's about application. And so I love to bring guests on the show and to let them share how do they strategize when they're going through a disruption or change. I love it when you guys engage. So please ask questions, please leave comments, even a hello and where you're from. We appreciate being with you and engaging with you. So today I have the pleasure of having my friend Kim with me. So please help me welcome Kim to the stage. Hey, Kim, thanks for being here.
Hi, Annie. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So tell our guests a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
All right. Well, I am, as you see, the pause lady, but I have been a consultant for over 35 years, and I'd go into all different kinds of companies, universities, government organizations, and kind of break fix, right? They were broken, and I came in to fix or even upgrade or transform them. And I live in the Midwest, and I have born and raised here, but I've traveled a lot in my life. So I've been to a lot of different places as well. So I've got a daughter who is in her mid-30s, and she's very successful. I'm very proud of her. And she's applied a lot of things that I actually have taught her, which I actually teach you right now. Today, I'm going to talk about. So
Where are you in the Midwest?
I'm in Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. All right. Yeah. I lived in Minnesota for 40 years and then fulfilled my 30-year dream to move to the beach, and just love to help people dream and to imagine what the world looks like and where they can travel to. So I love that you've traveled. A lot of Midwesterners are born and raised there and never leave, but I was born in California and always felt like a Floridian in my heart, even though I spent the majority of my life in Minnesota.
Yeah.
So I just want to talk to you, Kim, about, one thing that I talk about is disruption in organizations and individuals. So I always like to know, what would be your definition of just the word disruption? Sure. What does that mean to you?
Well, it is a disruption to me is when something in your life just kind of boom, like kind of throws you a curve, and then, or you actually make a choice to actually make a different turn in your life. So sometimes it's actually choice, but sometimes it isn't.
That's right. And in your life and in your work, like organizations that are restructuring or going through mergers can be a major disruption for people. And how about you personally? Do you have a professional or a personal disruption that you've gone through in your life?
Oh my goodness. I have a lot of disruptions, but I'm going to talk about one that's been very current. About in June of last year was the breakpoint disruption, but I decided to retire about 3 years ago. Okay. But in that retirement, I said, I'm going to teach at a yoga studio and get all kinds of certifications. So now I'm a 5-hour YT yoga teacher. And I taught and it's like, that was a lot of like headspace games, because here I am, this executive consultant. And then I moved into being a yoga teacher. So there's a lot of this like reframing my identity. Yeah. And then in June, well, it was probably 6 months before that. So maybe a year and a half ago. I kind of stopped. I quit because I said, oh my goodness, I did yoga meditation for me, for my health and well-being. And it started becoming again, a job, like, a career or whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm just going to stop for a bit. So I stopped, and that is the disruption, the big disruption, because in my mind, I said, okay, I had my career. I raised a very successful daughter. My husband is, retired and doing fine now, because that transition in retirement is always hard. I've ran a half marathon in all 50 states. I did my Ironman. I've traveled all over the place. And I said, okay, what's next? What do I do? Right. And I almost felt like I don't really need to do anything anymore, and then things kind of started to show up for me. Cornell University called and said, hey, you want to apply for a TEDx? So then of course I spoke a lot, but not TEDx format. There's a different format, right? And so then I joined a thought leader program. And they taught me, and of course, whenever I join something, it's like I'm practice to make sure that I do a good job at it and really get the value out of what I got, right? And about halfway through the year, this pause thing came up. And I actually paused for years before, where I actually disconnected from technology for totally a year in 2015, unplugged from social media for 6 months. And I wrote about it. So I had more time because I wasn't on the technology, and I wrote about it, journaled every day. And then in June is when the hit came, when I started seeing these news articles, TV, whatever, about these young 16-year-olds that they were committing suicide for just silly reasons in my mind. It's like, okay, these reasons, right? And I said, okay, this has got to stop. So that's when I said, okay, I'm going to try this pause challenge out for 5 days, bring some experts in. I had 42 experts, 300 people participated, and it was very, very successful. And now putting it into schools and companies. So it's really empowering people to really just practice the pause. Mm-hmm. And so the transition around this, so this is coming back to your disruption. The story around this is I come from business, right? And entrepreneurship is a very different world. I all of a sudden was now creating a new company that I didn't know I was going to do, right? Because I was kind of open to it. And that's the big thing, is staying open, pausing, stopping, closing your mouth, and really just letting things settle and even be bored or take walks or whatever. I mean, those are the things that I did. And I was listening to what came at me, and then I would just apply whatever that was. Started to learn some things like list building and marketing and sales, which I never, ever, ever did before.
And I'm going to kind of bring you back you don't have to, we're going to get through all this. You don't have to tell it all in one answer. We're just having a conversation, getting to know you, Kim.
I want to tell you why I disrupted and what happened.
Go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I will. I'm just being funny. So go for it.
No, keep going if you.
Okay. Yeah. So, really, I didn't. I was you ever see Charlie Brown the cartoon, and then they have this pig pen. Well, I was Pigpen, and I didn't realize I actually was in life. In fact, every time I would go into a new situation, a disruption in my life, right? It could have been empty nest syndrome, or, because that was a hard time for me too. And that was a big disruption. It took long because I only had one child. And I just jump in it messy. I have done that. That's part of my success, is I jump in messy. It's chaotic. And because a lot of people don't know how to pull the pieces together. And then it took me a couple months to just let things just pick away at the, things to do and get results, and then it started getting cleaned up, and things started to switch around where I really I was really listening and learning and applying, and really got that, I am really smart, because there was a time when I thought I'm dumb, because you're in a new space and then you start telling yourself stories about all this negative self-talk. And I realized I do that a lot. So I got to stop doing that. And I'm a really good storyteller, right? So I got to put that in books rather than telling myself the stories, right? And also being able to do that and putting some kind of techniques in place, like journaling, catching the thoughts or triggers, right? Because sometimes even the triggers caused anger for me, which I didn't even know I had. It's just like a big an explosion of self-awareness through this big major disruption in my life. And I am becoming even more, I'm knowing myself so much more now, and getting more connected to my heart, because I know that, I'm on my technology too much, or, my chaos is,
you have so many great ideas to talk about, and we're going to get to those. And so I just thank you for kind of describing to me. What I heard was your disruption was that you decided to retire.
Mhm.
You decided to explore yoga, and you became aware that your decision to make a disruption in your life didn't play out exactly as you had envisioned or imagined. And that's what I want our listener to think about, is sometimes disruption happens to us and sometimes we choose it, but sometimes even in the choice, just like us moving to Fort Myers Beach, it doesn't play out how you imagined. And so what I want you to do, you have so many things to talk about, Kim, and so many ideas and things you're doing. And certainly people can find you and find out more about
Yeah.
that. But really what we want to do is just take sound bites today of like, in the midst of that disruption, and you use the word success a lot, and I'm always curious about how people think about success, because I really think about success is not about achievement. Success is about well-being. Success is about self-care. So we're never trying to encourage our listeners to put more on your plate. We're really encouraging you. You use the word pause, but really to have that moment where we self-reflect and think about our stories. Do they serve us? Are they right for us? And so when you think about going back to the space of deciding, you know what, I'm ready to retire, and it not playing out how you envisioned, I wonder, how did you stay hopeful when it got really hard? What did you do? And you've kind of already shared some of those, but if you could just give us even 3 things that you did, like, oh my gosh, I was overwhelmed, it didn't play out how I thought. What
Yeah.
were 3 things you specifically
Yep.
did to stay hopeful in the hard?
Yep. So what I did was I stayed consistent in my regular schedule. That was a big one. I work out every day. I have a block when I do that. It didn't matter if I couldn't go swimming and I'd walk instead or do yoga. I had a block of time where I would be taking care of my body and my mind. That was number 1. Number 2 was I, I would journal, and I would also allow myself to catch myself when I was actually internalizing the stories. And it's like almost like I transformed, like I actually, my identity changed, shifted, because I was able to stop those stories. Like I was able to catch them where I never did that before. Right.
Yeah.
And the third thing is really seeing what triggers I actually have, and then diving in deep into those to understand, why are the triggers happening, right? And getting support around that to kind of just release that and the triggers go away,
Yeah.
using techniques on that. So
I love that. I love seeking support is so important. Having a routine or rituals is really important. One thing you said earlier too, which I'm such an advocate of, it's great to think about what I've achieved, what my family's achieved, but I think real growth and difference happens when we expand beyond ourselves. And one thing you said earlier is you started to notice and pay attention to these young people taking their lives. And so heart-wrenching to when we expand beyond ourselves and say, how can I pay attention and make a difference in other people's lives? As such a believer in that, hope comes when we first are hopeful. My second book's all about rewriting your stories that no longer serve you. And that's what you're talking about. But first we have to acknowledge there are stories happening in here. Even if nobody else hears them, we hear them repeated. And that story comes over and over. And I'm not this, and I should this. But when we rewrite that and stop it and then rewrite it and go, we can't just get rid of it. We have to replace it with what if. Be curious about ourselves. Why do I think that way? What taught me that? Who told me that? And how do I rewrite it and reframe it moving forward? And so I think of health, Kim, in kind of 7 areas. You have touched on too. We think about physical, emotional, mental, financial health, relationship health, career health, spiritual health. How did you stay healthy in the midst of the hard and of the awareness of this negative, non-serving messaging in your head?
Yeah. So again, the support, because I have different coaches, but I also, within my safe inner circles, I have different types of spiritual people. And the wild thing, when you had said mental health thing, being silent and aware and allowing things to come to me and accepting those, which is when people were practicing that time with me, where I've kind of put this accountability structure in place from October to December to practice this out, it became a mental health solution, which I didn't even know. I did not even know what was happening. And, some people were wanted to study their ancestral heritage to kind of see where the traumas came from. I mean, it's been so beautiful. It's been something that is so necessary in the world. And I didn't even know that, all I was doing is creating a space for it.
Yeah, I love that. I think one of the things you're talking about that I can't say enough to people that I get to meet is you shut down your computer. When do you shut down your body?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I love the fasting from social media or technology altogether. We were talking yesterday, I did a presentation, we were talking about news and people were talking about their anxiety being so high. And I'm like, where do you spend your time? I'm like, my medicine cabinet is very intentionally filled. I describe it as a medicine cabinet, but very intentionally filled with movement, music, laughter, people. And even if it's not completely unplugging from social media, because we want you to be here listening to this, what we want also is you to limit at minimum. Be careful what you watch, be careful what you listen to, be careful how much time you waste. And because comparison is the thief of all joy, and we get on social media and we go, oh, Kim's life is so successful, oh, her kids are perfect, oh my, people start to feel like they are less than, and it feeds that doubt that already exists within all people to some extent. When the pandemic hit, a friend of mine, a good friend of mine who's on TV, he's a news anchor, he said, I've never had anxiety or been aware of it. But he said, I think that everybody that had anxiety is super amplified. And even those of us that didn't know we had it or didn't think we had it, we became aware that we all had it, and that fear feeds anxiety. Fear was leading our lives. And I'm a big believer in the movie Defending Your Life, which is like, do you choose to live by love or by fear? Do you know the movie by chance, Kim?
I know the concept that you're talking about because that's what I've been applying to my life, but I have not watched the movie, no.
It's a goofy comedy with Albert Brooks and Meryl Streep, but it's 100% every decision, from what we wear to what we eat to who we talk to when we speak up to when we're silent, all have to do with the decision, are we living out of love or fear? And I really am super intentional about thinking, is that a fear decision or a love decision? A fear decision or love? And it just changes everything. So I love that you gave yourself permission, but not only became aware how much it helped you, invited other people to join you in, let's unplug, let's have silence. And even if it's not completely, to limit that time, you lose connection in your relationships, let alone what happens in our minds. How about happy? Where did you find humor and happiness in the midst of your disruption? Where did you go to find joy?
So in the morning, I actually do yoga, meditation, and then prayer. And I actually set an intention, and I give myself grace and tell myself I'm beautiful and tell myself I'm joyful every day, because I have realized that I have actually been very hard on myself throughout my life, not even knowing that I was doing that, saying negative things about myself. Not all the time, but it is a forgiveness exercise that I do. And I actually have it in like a regular schedule every day to make sure I'm doing that and setting the intention to be joyful. And I am.
I love that. I love that, Kim. One thing I think about that, when we become aware, what happens for me is that when I realize, I talk to people like why it matters what other people think about us and why we hear it so harshly is because we don't like ourselves that much. But when we learn to like ourselves and see the good in us, what it also trained me over many years now that I've worked on learning to love myself, embrace all of my silly parts and messy parts, is that I have immense compassion, recognizing that if I thought those things, imagine that other people think those things. And honestly, and maybe this is a judgment, I don't mean it to be, but people that are perfectly put together, I feel like are the harshest critics of themselves, because they want so much for you to think they have it all together and they're good and they're okay. And the truth is they're hiding their thoughts. They think they're hiding their thoughts from the world. But when people kind of just show up authentic and relaxed and kind of like, here I am, take it or leave it. I hope you think I'm great, but if you don't, it's okay. I still think I'm great. There's a peace about that. There's a comfort about that. And there's no need to be arrogant in the confidence. You don't need to push others down to be great. You need to have grace and compassion for other people. And so I wonder, Kim, before you went through this disruption that kind of woke you up to all this awareness and knowledge that now you help other organizations and individuals with, is there any lesson you wish you would have been able to tell that younger version of yourself, something you would have known or wish you could encourage the younger version of yourself or our listeners that are thinking not the best thoughts about themselves?
I would tell my younger self, you are beautiful. and I would tell myself, you're forgiven.
Beautiful. Forgiveness of ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hard on ourselves, very hard. And Kim, I know you've worked with many different organizations and individuals. Do you have a success story of something you kind of said when you show up, it's kind of broken and you turn it into beautiful, or it's falling apart and you kind of make it? Yeah.
Short story. Someone had reached out to me. She was very, very depressed. And 3 months later, after working with her, she was overweight as well. She lost 65 pounds, hated her job, got a new job. She was living separate from her partner, and she got married to him after 30 years of being a partner, and then moved into his house. So just amazing stuff happened. It was just an accountability, coaching, support, and giving her the different connections and tools that she needed to move forward like that.
Oh, I love that story because it's so true. It's like if we decide to like ourselves and we have the support, an encouraging support, not a judging support, not a you've tried it before, it won't work for you, but somebody who says, I got you. I'm still here with you. So you had a bad day. So what? We keep going. You're still beautiful. You're still worth it. You still can do this. I love that. And look at the immense transformation, Kim, right? Like that's what I owned gyms for 12 years. I had 2 gyms and I'm like, when you change one thing, it can change so many things. But mostly it's the habit, the mindset, the self-talk that needs to change all the other things. So that's a beautiful story. I love that. So what is some of the lessons that you have learned from this experience in your life? Like what is something like, oh, that was kind of hard, but I learned A, B, and C.
Yeah, I learned a lot about myself. I learned that my mom taught me a lot of these tools when I was a little girl, and I just built upon them and sharpened them and made them much more golden nuggets. And even the second thing that I learned is when I have a conversation with my mom, she's very hard on herself in her 80s, because that's what they do is sit a lot and can contemplate and look back to see because their bodies are different now, so they can't really look forward as much, or they think they can't in their head, right? So I'm there to support her in letting her know that I am who I am today, because I'm going to cry because of her, and I hate to see her crying like that. Not crying. He's me crying because I'm seeing myself in her. No, but I hate to see her having to give that sabotage. So I tell her that. And then the third thing that I've learned is everyone needs grace. Everyone needs forgiveness. So I tell her that every day in my prayers. And then when I do see her, I connect with her on the phone once a week. And then I come out because we're not close, like close in location. So I come out and take them both out to eat, because they're always, in their 80s. Again, they're at home. So those are the 3.
My speaker friends tease me that I make people cry for a living. And they're like, every time someone hangs out with you, they start crying. Do you feel good about that? I said, no, I do not make people cry. I make them feel safe, and tears come. So I love the tears. I'm all about their healing, their releasing, their whatever. And I love the nurturing of your feeling toward your parents. So a couple things about that is that I recently was talking to someone about, I always say, don't tell people you told me that story before, whether it's a child or an elderly person. It makes them feel small and invalued, and so, or undervalued. And because their world gets small, their highest thing to talk about is, guess what I'm having for lunch? Or I can't wait till lunch, or I'm going to the doctor, because they're not, because their world has shrunk. But I'm trying to see if I have it here in front of me. I don't think I do. But my first book I ever wrote, and I encourage people to use it for this, or to do something like this, whether they use my book or their own, is my first book I ever wrote was my sarcastic response to people telling me to write a book. And I don't like writing, and I have dyslexia and ADHD. So what I decided was, we all have stories in us, right? We all have stories. And so I wrote like 150 questions, like, what's your favorite place to travel? What's your best memory? What are you most proud of? And I really wrote it so that people that wanted to speak and write would use it as a prompt to write their own book. And it's called Past, Detours, and Possibilities. So that's why I wrote it. But what happened with this book is that people used it for a better date night to start communicating again. And then people used it and passed it back and forth with their teenage kids that didn't talk much. And they'd answer a page and they'd answer a page. I thought it was so cool. And then somebody wrote to me and said, I used it to interview my sister in hospice as she was dying, and gave the answers to her adult kids. And I always think, God's so good that he can take what we do and expand it for so many more things. But the reason I'm bringing it up to you, Kim, is that my mother lives in San Francisco, which is where I was born, and she still lives there. And not the last time, because I just saw her in the hospital, but the time before that, I went to visit, and we sat in the living room because there isn't a lot of hope. There isn't a lot of future. A lot of people will say to me, I don't need your books on personal development or professional development. I'm retired. I'm this. I'm like, never stop developing. It stops your brain. There's always things. But this book is just filled with kind of interview questions. I didn't really mean it that way, but really it kind of is. So I sat with my 95-year-old mother and I asked her all the questions and I wrote down her answers. And then I gave it to my kids as a Christmas gift. And though sometimes her answers were brief, sometimes they were expansive. And some questions she was like, I don't know, I don't care about that. But even if she gave me, it's like, what do you want to be remembered for? What's one of your greatest successes? What's one of your greatest joys? It's just a great book with prompts. And if you can interview someone older in your life and get them to think about and talk about something beyond lunch and the doctor, not only does it feel good to you, but it's such a gift to them too. And when my mother speaks in particular about her pre-kid years, she was a little bit older when she had children. She had traveled the world. She had done these things, like she lights up. It's a totally different side to my mom that I ever really got to experience. So I just encourage people, write down your own questions or get the book. I don't know, it's $10 or $20, and just ask those questions of yourself. Ask them of the people you love, especially older people that might not be with us as long. Ask those questions so that they can share pieces of themselves that they remember. And I love that you honor her little nuggets that she gave you that you kept refining through the years. That's beautiful. Kim, what else did I want to ask you? Something. So I want to ask you two questions. So one, and you kind of said always, but I would say likely when people retire, like your husband retired, sometimes it's very disruptive. And other times people have 100 hobbies. I get wives that want to hire me to work with their husbands. I'm like, do they have hobbies? No. And they're retiring. I'm scared. I'm like, they got to decide themselves. But what is your advice to people that are making a transition in their career or moving into retirement? And sometimes we move from retirement, like you kind of said, into, at least it started as, I want to do yoga, which was more of a passion. So what words do you have about retirement?
I would have to say, I mean, I have never had a coach for 35 years in the industry. Truly, I had to figure things out on my own. And when I did this transition, I coached my husband through retirement. It took him 6 years to get through that. And his expectations were, oh, I'm going to do this. Well, everything didn't turn out the way he thought it was in his mind. So that was the coaching part of it, right? So first get a coach, some support, some mentor, someone, that you can get that support, bounce ideas off. And then try different things. Number two, try different things outside of what your comfort zone is. We've tried pickleball. I didn't think I'd like it. I love it doing it with my husband. We can do it together. We go golfing now much more, and we enjoy that. We didn't have time really to get good at it, good enough to it to, because you have to, just like swimming. When I learned how to swim, it took me a while to really like it because I had to get a master swim coach to practice and learn, right?
Yeah.
And the third thing is have patience.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to, it's in your mind, you might be thinking it's going to turn out the way this is, but it typically doesn't turn out the way you think it's going to turn out because you grow, you're changing.
That's right. Have patience with yourself, have patience with the process. My youngest is moving from Minneapolis to North Carolina this weekend. And that was what I said to him last night. I said, just know, like a wedding day, you plan every detail. You think about everything, and it still doesn't play out like that. Give yourself grace. Have patience with the process. It's going to be slow. There's going to be disruptions. There's going to be construction or weather, whatever, just like retirement. I love that you say it's a process. And unfortunately, it is very unlikely most things, maybe not all things, play out exactly how we imagine in life. And so, Kim, you've given us a lot of great tips, a lot of great ideas today. What is the best way, if we have a listener right now and they want to connect with you about the pause or learn more about what the pause means for their life, what's the best place to connect with you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn and we can go from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with me today, Kim. I appreciate you and all your ideas. Thank you to our listeners. Remember, we love your questions, your comments, your encouragement, and myself or Kim or both of us will get back to you. Feel free to ask questions in any of the chat. Thank you and have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for being with me.